for it to function. But I'll let you know. Okay, Erin, we're ready to go.
Okay. I'm not quite sure, so you have to help me.
Of course, of course. Everyone, as we're getting started, so many of us are new to each other. This is Erin, and she was the vice chair last year.
I'm not quite sure, so you have to
Oh,
help me.
hang on just a second. We have of course. There we go. How's that? Did we get that fixed? Sorry about that.
Yes.
But we are officially live. So I was introducing Erin. Erin was the vice chair last year, and our chair's term ended. She served all the terms that she was allowed to serve, so she ended. And so Erin is so gracious to step in as facilitator today, but on the agenda includes the election of officers. And I know we want to begin with introductions. And Erin, I don't know if you'd like to just call on people, and then if you'd like everyone to say their names, or if you'd like them to add anything, that's up to you.
We could just go through, let's see. If I say your name wrong, I'm really sorry. So, Carlos.
I actually don't see Carlos, but I don't know who's on the phone with us.
Okay, we'll skip. Mel.
Hi there. Yes, Mel Gregg. What do I say, Gretchen?
Just say who you are. That's about it. I don't like introductions, so I'm
the
gonna.
HR director at the City of Woodburn, and I used to work at City of Salem for about 10 years. I live in Salem, and just glad to be here.
Good deal. Thank you. Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Infante, and I'm very new to the group. I live in Salem. I work for Capital Real Estate right now, so happy to be here.
Okay, thank you. Lori.
I think that both Lori and Tracy won't be able to join us. They both communicated in this afternoon that challenges had come up for them.
Okay, and I'm going to say this wrong, so can you help me? The next one. Oh.
Are you thinking of Oni?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
You can call me the one and only if you want. No,
Okay, I'll do that. The one and only. It's your turn.
No, one and only.
Oh, one and only. Okay.
Hi, my name is Oni Marchbanks. I am new to this appointment, but I'm not new to the work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thanks. Tracy.
And I don't think Tracy's with us either this evening.
David.
Hi, my name is David Reinhold. I've been on this board for 4 years, came off the year, and this recently went back on board again for another year.
Nice. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, and I own an insurance company in Salem.
Nice. Grant.
Hi, my name is Grant Yoder, and I'm pleased to be here with you today.
Nice. And then Mark.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Weinstein. I'm an assistant city attorney with the City of Salem. One of my departments that I represent is the Salem Police Department. And as a result of that, I'm also the legal advisor to this board, together with some other boards that I advise and some other departments of the city. I believe you'll hear a lot more from me at our next meeting, but in general, I just sort of in the background, listening, and will participate to the extent that there's a legal question or a procedural question. But short of that, my job is to just not be present and interjecting unless it's something that in my capacity with the board, I'm called upon to do.
Thank you. And last but Steve.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button.
It's
Sorry,
okay.
half my head's cut off. I'm trying to figure that out too. But my name is Steve Galvin. I am a sergeant with the Salem Police Department, our professional standards unit. Also is Lieutenant Brandon Ditto. I don't see him signed in yet, but I sent him a text to see. But we'll go over some new policy stuff this evening, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's it. Whew, we could pass that one. Let's see.
Oh, Erin, I'm going to interrupt you. It looks like Carlos is just arriving. So FYI, and I don't know who's on the telephone with us. Does someone have a phone number in addition, or do we have an extra guest tonight?
Looks like it's a 541 number.
Mhm. All right, that's okay. It's a public meeting. I was just curious if someone wanted to say hi.
Gretchen,
Gretchen,
Oh, yes.
Gretchen, I'm probably the one that you're seeing the telephone number for. This is Les Ruark. I'm simply listening tonight as an interested person, and I used to live in Salem, and I now live in Eastern Oregon.
That's right. Les, welcome. Thanks for being here this evening.
and Carlos. Carlos, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hold on. How's it going now? I'm sorry, I just got off of work.
No
Name
worries.
is Carlos Flores. I work, I do a lot of operation management. I kind of run a company kind of thing. I live in South Salem. And yeah, so glad to be here and be able to help out.
Awesome, thank you. And Gretchen, we forgot Gretchen.
Oh, no worries. I think I've had the chance to meet everybody. I'm Gretchen. I'm on the staff team at the mayor and city manager's office at the city of Salem, and the liaison to you all. So glad to help you with your work this evening.
We
And-
all
oh,
appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Erin. And for those of you who just joined us, I want to make sure you're aware that we are broadcasting live on YouTube right now. So just be conscious of that.
So next is approving the minutes. So did you guys have time to read those, or do you want to read those right now?
And I
Just
know
make one-
it's
can I
difficult.
just make-
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Can I just make one point of order? I'd suggest, excuse me, let me start my video, forgive me. Won't just be this blank square with audio. We have a lot of new people that weren't present at the last meeting. I'd recommend to the board that if you were not present at the last meeting, that you abstain from participating in the vote on the approval of the minutes.
Sounds good. So everyone was there last time. Do you need time to read those minutes?
I was there, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. Motion, second motion. I guess me. Can I do that? Okay. And do we have public comment?
Just a quick double check, Erin, for all those that were
Sorry.
at the meeting, is there anyone who doesn't approve the minutes? Just to double check, make sure. Okay, very good. To public comment, there may be people here tonight that, I don't know if Les would like to share anything, but I did not receive any public comment in writing to bring. Occasionally, we would get public comment that's in written form, but we did not receive anything outside this meeting.
Okay. Les, do you want to share anything?
No, Madam Chair, I don't. I'm simply listening tonight, but thank you for that opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you. And we have no request for review hearings, right?
That's correct. I am working with somebody who called in last week, but they haven't yet completed their process with the police department. And so it's not even through the police department work yet. And they may or may not end up requesting a review, but I am working with a community member right now on something, but yeah, nothing for the board tonight.
Okay. Salem PD policy update.
Yeah, so I guess that's my turn to go.
Yeah.
And just to introduce myself again, it's been, I said last meeting, kind of, we didn't get through, so, and there's some new faces, so I'll just introduce myself and tell you a little bit about myself. So again, my name is Steve Galvin. I've been with the Salem Police Department for a little over 15 years now. I am currently a sergeant, so I would supervise like a squad of people, but now I'm assigned to our professional standards unit, where we receive complaints, we investigate complaints against officers, and we look for policy violations within those complaints. I have a wife and 4 kids, 15, 14, 12, and 11. So we're very busy with music stuff and kid stuff, running around and everything like that. So that's just a little bit about me. I wanted to let you guys aware of kind of some new policy that came out. It actually came out in November of last year, but because of, we were going to talk about it last meeting, because we did not have a quorum, we didn't get to it. So I wanted to go over it. Should have been sent out in an email. It's labeled Directive 8.40, and its title is the Supervisor After Action Review. So, and I'll just kind of briefly go over it with everybody, and then open it up for questions. I have a couple examples I can go over as well. So the reason this policy was created is we really wanted to create a system, not we, the department, sorry, I didn't have anything to do with it, but the department wanted to create a system of transparency and accountability, and a little bit quicker from the initial time of an incident. So we do have other review boards in place that we've had in place for years, where they go through and review our tactics, and but sometimes it can take a while for it to cycle through that system. So this has to be completed by the supervisor in a very timely manner. I think it says down in here within 24 hours. And so from there, it gets sent to that supervisor's lieutenant, who has to approve it, and then it gets sent up to the deputy chief within 7 days. So when we have an incident, and I'll go through those here in a second, it really kind of tightens that time frame down. So if there are training issues or policy violations, then we can address those in a faster manner. So the purpose of it, and if I am going too fast or anybody has a question, just stop me. I'm totally fine with that. But it's also to evaluate our training and policies. We're constantly trying to redo our training and revamp our training to the best practices, because there's other agencies out there that we can learn from. There's other people we can learn from. So just going over the procedure part of it, it's required by supervisors. That's whoever the supervisor would be on scene, like a sergeant, and they has to be done when there's an employee on duty, like an officer, that's injured and resulting in hospital treatment. So it could all the way be from like a jammed finger. That would be resulting in, maybe they go to the hospital, they have to get x-rays, they have to get some treatment from the hospital. That would trigger a supervisor after action. So, and on a side note, I just got a message from Lieutenant Ditto. He's running a little late, but he'll be logging in shortly. So the second one is any known or alleged injury to the suspect in custody resulting in the use of force. So if we do end up using force on a suspect and they are injured by that force, then it would be documented. Sometimes we use force, or what we would consider force, by policy, but it doesn't always result in an injury. Vehicle collisions. we damaged some cars, and they want to track that a little bit closer, a little bit more timely. And we've always tracked it. We've always done documentation and memos and stuff like that. But again, trying to tighten that timeline up a little bit. So you'll notice under 4, the after action or operational order. So sometimes when we develop like a warrant to search a house, the detectives would have to create like an operation order that specifically lays out what the objective is, what their role is, what their legal ability is, all that. So anytime those after actions get done, again, the supervisor on scene would have to do the after action report. Damage loss to city property, that could be all sorts of different city property, you name it. If it's damaged city property, then it would get done. Vehicle pursuits. So for years, we've always done a pursuit report. That's still by the officer would complete that. That covers different speeds, locations, vehicles. But again, just for tracking purposes, that's included. Taser deployments, and it says 3 or more cycles, and that was a very specific reason that was put in there. And Lieutenant Ditto could probably touch on that a little bit closer. I have an idea why, but he's very versed in that. So I'll divert that to him if he wants to explain that a little bit more. If you have questions why that's 3 or more and not just like 1 taser deployment. The use of a police canine resulting in a bite. Usually there's injury involved in that too. So you kind of cover 2 different reasons why we would do the after action. And then the use of a firearm on an animal. So we do get calls like where deer get struck by vehicles and injured, where to the point where it's like, well, we need to put them down for their own well-being. Or other animals. So, and that's just tracked because we are using our firearm, and we should be tracking that in the sense of even when we're doing it on an animal, not just documented a report, because it would get documented in the report, but this is a quicker way to, again, to track that. So again, part of the reason for doing this, so we can look at, we can see if there's policy violations or training concerns. So when there is determined training deficiencies or concerns about policy violations or misconduct, then it immediately gets kicked to professional standards lieutenant, which would be Lieutenant Ditto. So we can start looking into that. So some of like the training side of it, I could use an example of a pursuit. We do have a pursuit policy. If the pursuit gets terminated, there's certain things the officers have to do. And say, for example, the officer doesn't terminate the pursuit when the supervisor or anybody else says terminate, that would be a pretty clear policy violation. So we could look at it in a couple different ways. Like, okay, is it a training issue? Like, do we need to just sit down and have a conversation with the officer? Hey, listen, the pursuit was terminated and you didn't terminate. That's a concern. Or is it an equipment issue? Maybe their radio cut out because they're, in an area where the radios don't, get good coverage. And then if it is an equipment issue, then maybe we can look into that equipment issue further. So it really gives us that ability to track some of that stuff and really look at, why some of the things are happening. So there is a summary that the supervisor writes. It's a short little summary just to give a synopsis. Again, police reports are being generated. They could be several pages long, giving every detail, but this is just a quick synopsis. And then the findings and recommendations. If there's no policy violations, everything was within policy, then it would just basically say everything is within policy. If there is, hey, there might have been a concern with equipment issues, or maybe the car, something wrong with the car, then that's where the recommendations will come in. Again, we kind of covered within 24 hours. It has to be completed in 7 days to the deputy chief. And It is saved and uploaded into our record keeping system. And I think I covered pretty much everything else. You know, we really want to, if there is like some concerns with use of force or whatever, and we determine it's a training issue, we want to reevaluate that so we can address it and maybe do some more training. Maybe we're seeing a spike in, you know, a certain area that we can provide training for the entire department to cover versus like one individual officer. So, and then any other questions come up yet? I know I kind of cruised through that. Yeah.
I do have a couple questions, Sergeant. Has this policy been bargained with the union yet? Is it ready to go? Where are we?
Yeah, so it's in place, like it's actively being used right now. And the union does review the policies before we push them out as, hey, this is policy. So yeah, it's been vetted by the union. They've looked over it. And it's in place since November. So it's up and running.
And then I have another question. This administrative investigations, when it says unless prohibited by law, the officers, upon the request, they will be able to review it before giving a formal statement.
Are you looking at the body worn camera?
Yeah, what are we talking about?
We're looking at the supervisor after action report.
I was just trying to follow up with you. What are we doing?
Oh,
I totally missed it. But okay,
I'm
when
sorry.
it comes to that, I'm going to have a question on that one.
Okay, all right.
Sorry about
We'll
that.
get to that one in a second.
But good to know. I'll quickly catch up with the other one. I may still have questions.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Any other questions about?
Yeah, I saw Lieutenant Ditto had the opportunity to join us. I am curious about the use of the taser, if he'd be able to speak about it.
Yeah, so Lieutenant Ditto is one of our primary, he's pretty knowledgeable about the taser stuff.
I believe he's here with us.
Yeah, and he's going to cover the body worn camera. Lieutenant, do you want to cover why there's 3 cycles on the taser?
Sure. Yeah, so in essence, with any kind of electrical disruption device, but specifically with the taser, so Axon is the company that is the LLC that has created the taser devices and has for the last 20 years. So they're kind of the sole industry in the market. And what they've done is year over year, they've done studies on both humans and throughout the years in all different formats, from like under stress in water, things like that. And what they've seen is that at 3 cycles is when the heart rate starts to elevate. So it can cause some elevated heart rate after 3 cycles. So it's a consideration that, because essentially the taser is a 5-second cycle, right? So one taser deployment, if you have good connection with the probes, it'll consist of a 5-second cycle, and then the device will stop unless the person who's holding it has to hold the trigger down for whatever reason. But one pull of the trigger is 1 5-second cycle. And so 3 cycles in a short time frame, so 3 pulls of the trigger, or 1 continuous cycle, 15 seconds, was seen to elevate the heart rate to a degree that was it was more consistent with a higher level of exercise, because they attribute a taser pulse to 5 seconds to running a flight of stairs. So running 1 flight of stairs, that's about what happens physiologically to your body in that time period to the average person. And that's been vetted in a number of studies. And so what they saw is that if you do 3 continuous cycles, that it can elevate the heart rate past that point. And it would not a consistent point that you would see with like 3 flights of stairs. You see an abnormal spike. And so it's a consideration for all the taser users that if you're going to use that level of force, you have to consider what the effects are. And the legal term for it is the quantum of force, because what are the reasonable and foreseeable effects of the taser device, and what it does to the person, right? So what for taser in general, there are certain times that you don't want to deploy the taser, right? If somebody's standing on a second-story building on the edge, we know that the taser is designed to lock up the muscles in the body. Carl, it's called neuromuscular incapacitation. It's where you see that stiffness of the muscles. And so then a person can't control themselves and they could fall, right? So reasonably, if you foresaw that risk, then a taser wouldn't be an appropriate use of force in that circumstance. The same goes to this, is that we have to assess the reasonableness if they're going to use a taser for 3 or more consecutive cycles. Was that a reasonable or appropriate use of force? Because there are increased effects to the body, not as extreme as falling off a second story of a building, right? But there's an increased risk to the person, so that has to be considered when you're using that level of force.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, I have just one last follow-up question. I see that the reason that this policy might be in place, is there a reason that it doesn't also include just the use of firearms in general? Obviously, if someone was hurt, then that would be included here. I'm fairly new to the board, so it could be covered also.
Yeah, so the overall use of firearms, that triggers some other laws through Senate bills and stuff like that, where that has to be investigated by an outside agency, and it triggers a whole nother process that is immediate. So I think within that policy, it doesn't necessarily fit, because all the things that they're looking at in the investigation, they're going to cover that this policy already would. So, for example, anytime somebody discharges their weapon at a human being, that's going to be investigated as as a criminal act until, and then that investigation by the outside agency, we typically would use Oregon State Police. Once their investigation is complete, then that would go before a grand jury, and that grand jury would determine whether yes, that criminal act occurred, or no, that criminal act occurred, it was justified. And this is a long process, and maybe next meeting we could probably expand on that a little bit more if that's something you guys would be open to listening to. We can pull up the policy, because we have specific policy just directed towards those circumstances.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So the back to the supervisor after action, I think I sent it or had Gretchen send it in the email, the actual form, and you can kind of see that it's just some check boxes. But I wanted to cover a couple that I foresee might be some question, like a specialized unit checkbox at the top. That would be like our detectives. That would be some of our undercover officers. It wouldn't be specifically patrol. Was responding officer CIT. That CIT is crisis intervention training. So that's a 40-hour class that officers are sent to, or that can attend. They go specific into dealing with people in crisis. So it could be from mental health issues, or not simple, but even just depression. So maybe somebody's just having a really bad day, and trying to how are they, how can we work through, de-escalate some of those emotions that they're feeling and going through, and then how did that resolve itself. So where that comes into play is if we have somebody that potentially has a weapon that's confronting the police officers, the question is going to be, well, how did you de-escalate them, or how did you attempt to de-escalate them? So the fact that if the officer was CIT trained, that gives them a lot of tools for de-escalation, in addition to what we already teach about de-escalation, in addition to what they learn at the academy. In the academy, they cover the majority of the crisis intervention training, but I think the 40-hour class that we try to send officers to is a little bit more in depth. It's actually really cool, because at the last day they have community members that struggle with some of the things, and they come in and they talk and give real life experiences, what it's like going through some of these mental health issues and stuff. So I attended it several years ago, and it was actually one of my more favorite or enjoyable classes to attend. So, and then the warning before force was used, some of that's in policy. We want to give people the whole point to use force is to gain compliance and tell people what to do. So if somebody is not doing what we're requesting, we want to capture that, right? Did we give them the opportunity to comply to what we were saying? So that's just how we can capture that in this form. And then I also wanted to touch on this farther down. It says, I reviewed all known or available reports and determined I read the police reports consisting with my investigation. So that's the supervisor saying yes or no. But it's really important that we found that the supervisor on scene approves and reads the reports of the officers that were in the circumstance where it was a pursuit or where it was something else. Because the last thing we want is, say, a graveyard officer getting in a pursuit and the day shift supervisor reading the report, not knowing anything about the circumstances going into it. So it gives a little bit more accountability to the supervisors and to the officers being able to address those concerns in a timely manner if there even is concerns. And then I gave the example about the pursuit being terminated. That would be that policy violation. If it didn't get terminated in a timely manner, or when it was, called to be terminated, then we can look at the equipment, if they heard it, the training, or other, outside influences, whatever, we can address those. So I have a couple examples I'll just read to you because I couldn't get it redacted. So I'll try to redact it on the fly here, so it might be a little choppy, but basically the brief summary is, on such and such date, the officer completed a traffic stop. The driver was found to have a full extradition warrant out of Louisiana. The officer arrived, or another officer arrived as a cover officer, so that would be a second officer, and asked the person with the warrant was asked to step out of the vehicle and was being detained. They did not comply. The driver's door was open, so the officer grabbed the person with the warrant, taken out of the vehicle, and pinned against the driver's side using strength as the subject started to resist. So then he says he completed Sankajo, which is what we call our handcuffing tactic. It's how we are taught to handcuff. It's just a name that's associated with it. So then the subject started physically resist violently with the officers and began to kick the vehicle. So push back off the vehicle with his feet. So then the officers, as they got him closer to the patrol car, continued to push off the vehicle in an attempt to kick officers. And then, so one of the officers reported a minor sprain to his right thumb during the incident. Another officer was kicked multiple times in his shin, but did not report any injuries. And then they attempted to interview the subject, and he mentioned his shoulder hurt. So he refused to answer any other questions. And then the officer says, or the sergeant says, I reviewed all known and available reports once they were completed. So that's just kind of a brief, that's a little bit longer than what other ones I've looked at are, but that's kind of the brief, the situation, and how it resolved or evolved itself. Another one I have is from a pursuit. So on such and such date, the officer located a rolling stolen, and what that is a stolen vehicle that's occupied and driving down the road near, and it gives the intersection. The vehicle began to accelerate away from the officer. The officer activated overhead emergency lights and broadcasted that he was in pursuit. And the vehicle went westbound onto a road. as the vehicle eluded through the neighborhood. Broadcast speeds were approximately 30 miles an hour. And then it continued north, and the speeds increased to 85 miles an hour. So as it was going north, they deployed our spike strips, but then this pursuit was terminated by the supervisor because of the speeds in the direction that it was going. And so then the officer broadcasted that he acknowledged the termination and discontinued the pursuit. So the actions were found within policy, and the sergeant reviewed all the known and available reports at the time. So then under this one, under the critique and recommendations, the supervisor spoke to the officer about why the supervisor terminated the pursuit and explained that, and made the suggestion that to the officer, like when they start seeing these speeds getting up to 85 in a potential residential area, yeah, they should probably be terminated that themselves. So not necessarily a policy violation, more of a training concern, like, hey, these are some things to keep in mind when you're doing these pursuits, and this is why the supervisor terminated it. So any other questions for that policy? All right, I know I kind of cruised through that. So, and I think Lieutenant Ditto is going to cover the body worn camera policy.
Okay, so instead of going through the entirety of the policy, I'll give you everyone a once over the world of where we're at with our evaluation. And then if you have specific questions, I know you've had the directive for a period of time. If you have questions about it, just let me know. We do have funding for body worn cameras. I believe everybody here is aware of that. And so with that, we've looked at a number of body worn cameras throughout the country that other organizations have been utilizing. And it came down to basically 3 different cameras for us that would fit our needs the best. And one is, the company's called Motorola. They make a lot of radios. They've from commercial to just personal radios. I mean, you'll see those little walkie-talkies or telephones that are Motorola, but they're obviously a vast company, international. And so they actually make our radios, and we use some of their products that connect with the radio systems. One is our Command Central Aware that is a mapping program as well. So Motorola radios is one that we just completed one of our evaluations on. We did a month-long evaluation of not only the body worn cameras. We had 9 officers that field tested the body worn. I'm sorry, 8. One person didn't start the fielding process because they were gone on an extended vacation, but 8 for the Motorola radios. But then also we had a vehicle as well that we tested that had an in-car video system that was installed. So we just completed that last week for our first month-long test. Next week, we'll start with another company called GTAC. GTAC is a company that makes a lot of laptops and tablet options that are more ruggedized, military-grade products. So we currently use GTAC for our in-car tablet systems for our computer-aided dispatch. So that is where we'll see the call come onto the screen. We can just touch screen it, tap it, and get call details as we're going to calls. We can run names and license plates through the data system as well. But that's primarily what we've used for GTAC in the past is the tablets and the laptops systems for in-car, and also the other ones externally that we've used. But so next week we'll start GTAC, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have in-car systems. We're actually going to have 2 different, because they have 2 different models for us to view. And then we'll be doing the body worn camera systems as well. And then finally, for the last month of our trial fieldings, we're going to use Axon. And Axon is the company I just briefly mentioned that they are the LLC that created the TASER devices. And so they also went into the body camera realm, and they've been out. They were actually one of the first body camera national fielded body cameras in the country. So we'll wrap everything up with them. The only difference with them is that they based on the capacity limitations they've had with how much their product is in demand, that they won't be able to field us a vehicle, but we'll be able to for a full month, but we'll have a vehicle to test out for scenarios and things like that as we do this process. So during this timeline, we have 9 officers identified that are going through this process. It'll be the same officers. They evaluate each system after that month-long period. So we're looking at, it'll be about mid-June as we wrap this up for the 3 different systems until we make a final determination. And it's not just the hardware systems that we're looking at, but obviously the back-end software systems, the redaction software, the evidence storage, and ease for providing FOIA requests to the community. So there's a lot of different components of our evaluation process. But in general, like I said, we've just went through the first one, and our officers that have tested it can't get enough. They love it. They don't want to stop using them. So it's been pretty positive, and we're pretty excited about having the opportunity to get the cameras out there. Did anybody have any specific questions as they were looking through the policy about how we'll be continuing on this policy? I know there was a question earlier about the union and how that was vetted. And this was agreed upon with our Salem Police Employees Union. This was also looked at through the local district attorney's office and our city attorney's office as well. So, and then a lot of the material in here came from kind of the model policies throughout the country. Some from Lexipol, if you've ever heard of that, is a company that creates policies throughout the nation. Some of it's state specific, some of it's federal guidelines. And so just to make sure we're consistent with all those guidelines and of course our state guidelines and laws, a lot of that was created off of those policies, those model policies. So.
And Second Dito, that was me. I was going to ask the question. This section 16 has that unless prohibited by law, that the officers will be allowed to review. I assume also prior to providing a formal statement. I was just wondering if you could give us what kind of circumstances would be prohibited by law.
Under administrative investigations, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, the 16.
Yeah. So in general, where there's kind of a mixed, this is across the country, right? Is that after, and we're talking about critical incidents mostly is when this kind of stuff comes up, but officer involved shootings, in custody deaths that don't happen as a relation to a shooting or something like that. And there's competing philosophies on this across the country. I'll just kind of let you know that is that some people believe that officers should absolutely be able to review their footage to fully clarify what occurred prior to them making a statement. And our policy is consistent with that portion of it, is that if they're going to give a statement about something that they were directly involved in, they will have an opportunity to review the footage and then give a statement. Now, if we are not in control of every investigation, as Sergeant Galvin mentioned, is that if an officer involved shooting occurs, Senate Bill 111 kicks in, and that's maybe a longer conversation, but in essence, it triggers a lot of things. And one of them is that we don't investigate our own shootings. We don't investigate ourselves, right? And so another agency comes in, like Oregon State Police. We've used different agencies in the past, but primarily we use the Oregon State Police to do any investigations like that. And so that investigation, the lead for that investigation is the local district attorney's office. And the local district attorney has a say in if they're going to allow the footage that was gained during that investigation if that can be viewed by the officer prior to them being interviewed, right? So if it comes to that circumstance that they wouldn't be, or if there was a law that said you cannot view body worn camera footage prior to giving a statement, that is just to encompass all of that. So anything within the law or with that investigating agency that says, no, we're not going to allow you to view that. We want, and just in general, what in Marion County, it would be that the officer would be allowed to provide their statement initially, their thoughts, their emotions, feeling with, and then they would be allowed to review the body worn camera footage. And if there was any inconsistencies, they would be given an opportunity to explain those inconsistencies of something that, oh, I didn't see this. I mean, it's much different, obviously, as we know, right? Of looking at something when you have a body worn camera that's facing one direction, and that's all it sees. It doesn't turn with your head. And it definitely doesn't give you that 50-yard line view that you might get from another camera that sees different things. So you want to, it is valuable to get the officer's feelings, thoughts, and their perspective and their point of view prior to them viewing some footage that might imprint new memories or new associations that maybe the information they didn't have when they were actually viewing it from their perspective. So again, there's kind of two competing thoughts there, but depending on how the law flows, we want to be consistent with the law. So it just wanted to say there that if it is prohibited by law at any point, that we would be in line with that, and we wouldn't.
So can I ask something though as a follow-up? So I understand all of that. Of course, it's the DA's office or the investigating agency who's in charge of the investigating agency, and officer involved shooting is not necessarily the law, so it's not prohibited by law, but it's more like a choice at that point.
Sure.
Of the DA's office. And then this policy looks like it doesn't cover that part. That if that, because, or will it be the chief of police determining that this would be interfering? Is that the third paragraph that covers that section? That possibility?
Yeah, so the third paragraph there covers kind of what I talked about there, right?
So instead of the DA's office, then chief of police will be?
Will not be allowed.
Or how does that happen?
Yeah, so such reviews will not be allowed if the chief of police or his or her designee determines the review would interfere with the ongoing criminal investigation. So
The other
yes.
agency would be the designee kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then, but right now there isn't a law that you cannot view. But if there was, then that would cover it in that circumstance. But as of right now, there is no law for that.
I'm trying to do due diligence, making sure if this ever became an issue. And I'm assuming was this discussed with the unions yet, or?
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
unions? Okay.
Yeah, this is a published directive.
It is a published directive.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I didn't see the date or anything.
Yeah, so
It looks
we
like,
published it right before the trials to make sure it was consistent there. But the one you have doesn't have the date on it. That's odd.
no, I thought
yeah.
it was still okay, draft.
Yeah, I apologize. That was published. Oh, you know why? Because this was sent before our last meeting, which was months ago, and I think this is the same one that was sent, but it was published since then, just before our trials.
So last year in November, or?
Yeah, when was our last meeting that we weren't able to establish the meeting in totality because we didn't have a quorum.
That's January. Yeah.
Yeah, that was in January. So that was when this was initially sent. And I think at that time it wasn't fully published, is why the dates weren't on it, but it has since been.
I'm sorry, I have a question. So that's in regards to the officer being allowed to review the footage? Okay. Prior to statement, right?
Yes. Yeah, and so for administrative investigations, that is typically our internal investigations. I mean, specifically in this section, they would be allowed to view their footage. And that's kind of the common way for like day-to-day business that it would be, right? Is that you're able to, like, if you get footage from a local, you get into some sort of altercation with somebody, and oh, hey, they have camera footage from a nearby store or something like that. They would review that as they're typing the reports for accuracy and everything else. So in general, for day-to-day operations, it would be that would be the practice, is to, yes, you can review all the evidence and then to develop your reports.
Actually, I apologize. Under section 18.5, it does directly talk about unless prohibited by the lead investigating agency. So that covers that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think it was clear enough, but.
Yeah, the critical instance section clarifies that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Ditto, you mentioned taking sample policies from Lexical earlier. Is this taken from sample policy, and is there a similar policy in use across the nation?
So this fits with, so everybody's directives kind of have their own little flavor, right? Everybody's got their own writing styles. So this was all developed from those model policies, but it fits within our kind of our template or design. But yes, a lot of the content either comes from that. I know there was some, and I wasn't heavily involved in development on this. I was in a different position at the time. But I know that we had looked at policies from, like, Springfield had just gone through this process, and a couple of other agencies. And then we marry that with, and in general, that's the starting point for any new policy development, as we look at, hey, what is the national model policy? And then we look at our state policies that'll align to make sure that it's consistent with legislative updates and things like that. And that's all applied. And then we kind of craft it into our template of design, so it looks familiar to all the officers.
Do we have dashboard cameras?
We did. They're not in use anymore. We had those. Oh man, I can't remember how long ago we got those. Probably 2009. We had those. They were kind of hit or miss. They weren't the greatest cameras. I used them a handful of times. I didn't love them, but the ones now, I can tell you, the ones that we just tested with Motorola are fantastic. And they integrate and they link with your body camera, so the timing synced and everything. Much different feel and ease of use, and just the glitches in general. You just don't have that, because that's the goal, right? Is you need something consistent. You need something easy to use. You need big buttons and stuff that's easy to grab, especially under stress. And all of the systems that we're looking at have a passive recording option. So what that does is it records continuously. And once you tap the button to start the recording, you can make the setting for 30 seconds prior to the tap of the button, a minute, up to 2 minutes for all the cameras that we're testing. So once I tap the button, I'm not only going to capture when I tapped it, but the 2 minutes prior to that as well, which is stuff that we didn't really have a lot of access to before. The technology's advanced to that point. The battery life's advanced to that point for the Warren cameras. So these will last about 10, 11 hours, which our shifts are 10 hours in length. And Motorola, for one, has interchangeable batteries, which is really nice too. Is midway through your shift, you can change out your battery. You don't have to worry about losing any opportunities for camera footage.
What kind do they use in Polk County?
Polk County has, I did know this, I apologize. Because I've viewed their cameras in the past. It's not one of the, I don't believe it's one of the three that we're testing.
Oh, okay.
I think theirs is app based on their phone.
That's right.
There's a couple agencies where they have an app on their cell phone, their department cell phone, and it clips just on the outside of their shirt or their vest, and it's all through the app. And talking to them, it sometimes there's a lot of hit or miss stuff. It's not super consistent.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different systems out there.
Right.
Not to be facetious, but do canines look valuable on cameras?
The canines, I can tell you that we did purchase some canine cameras, and they were high back mount off the harness of the canine. And those were, the consistency wasn't really there for that. So we did have some of those. And basically the handler would wear a wrist device, which was a little camera system where they could watch the dog enter and leave and actually give commands through that system that the dog could hear. But it was so spotty and the range wasn't very good that it just wasn't very functional. And again, it's just, I mean, this is technology in a matter of really the last 5 or 6 years. It has advanced so much that, we're to the point that that thing is completely obsolete now. I know it's still used for some training things and events. It'll help with training, but to actually use it in the field and expect it to capture things consistently, it's really not there.
So this policy and this model is used for accountability, correct? And is it also, it's also used to come back and review steps that could have been taken differently, right? Things that don't end up going to the district attorneys or to grand jury, things that stay at the level of the chief. Is that then reviewed and used for training purposes?
So like the footage that we see
Yes.
that people were outside, yes. So
and I relate that back to, sorry to interrupt you, to the CIT training.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Can
Well, I asked, there's a lot of different, I know it was mentioned about the people who are in crisis, right? The mentally ill, or people who are experiencing like a drug-induced psychosis. When dealing with that, I know I didn't see too much of that on here, on the subsections under the procedure, what to be investigated, but how do you deal with that? Right.
Going back to the after action form.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So we have a policy directive for emotionally disturbed persons specifically. There's other directives that cover that in more detail. But are you talking about if someone, like if their actions don't comply with training? Is that what you're?
Yes. So
directive in general.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to handle that. We always have sergeants in the field in Salem. And so the most common thing that would happen is if something didn't go as well as you'd want it to, and maybe isn't perfectly in line with training. And if it's a small level thing, say, hey, maybe you need to try this differently. It's typically a conversation, right? If something is a clear policy violation, that can escalate to different levels of progressive discipline. It could be a written counseling statement, something that would go in somebody's file for up to a year and be documented that way. And if it's consistent policy violations, or things that are greater than these low level things, like somebody is just well outside of the directive and using a lot of profanity, using abusive words, physically, like manhandling somebody, things like that. That's where those ones are like, we do a full investigation on. And at times we put people on an administrative leave to separate them from the road during that time period if it's that egregious. And then once the total investigation is complete, then we would go through the process, a disciplinary process, to determine what level of discipline would be appropriate, or training. But typically when it gets to that level, you're looking at both. You're looking at some level of discipline and then some remedial training after the fact, if it's somebody that we retain for employment. So this is just depending on the severity, right? Just not talking about any situation individually, but just in general, that's the range. We use a progressive discipline model, and we have a heavy training focus for remedial training for even small small issues we see, right? That's the best way to hit those early, is you see those deficiencies, and typically it's somebody was trained poorly, or they just didn't know how to handle a situation and they reacted poorly because they were never trained in a certain way. And a lot of that stuff can be resolved. And just in general, I think a lot of folks are out there just trying to do the best they can, and some of them just don't have the same capabilities of others, or they just weren't trained properly. And so a lot of the things we can resolve in those manners.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, I think another part of your question, if I'm hearing you right, is using a video for training.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we look at, like an example, there's websites that, are specific for police, and they have videos of, incidents that officers are involved in, and we review those and we use those for training all the time. So that it's a great source for training, whether things went well or whether things went, poorly. And we can learn from every single thing regardless. There's always something we can do better. So the ability to look at some of these body worn camera footage and say, hey, this would be a great training scenario that we could run through and show and learn from that. The other part of it is, say there is that policy violation, or even a citizen complaint. A citizen calls in and says, hey, this officer was rude to me, or what have you. The first thing that I'm going to do as an investigator is go pull their body cam footage and say, hey, let's look at the body cam. Let's see what that shows. So that's where we could also use it, if that answers that question.
Yeah, that does. I mean, there's always different, as being in the community, you see people who are maybe going through different psychosis, or and as individuals, we don't even know how to walk around them or approach them. So taking that into consideration when an officer actually has to deal with them, right? Like how do you, that body cam footage, is then used for training, because that may be a psychosis or something that, someone may have not dealt with in the past.
Yeah. And some of that CIT training, some of the best training is if you have somebody that suffers from schizophrenia, actually looking at somebody and listening to how they converse and how they talk is, great training to learn how to talk to somebody with schizophrenia versus maybe somebody that's under the influence of intoxicants.
Or to differentiate that, right?
Exactly. So there's a lot of training that we can use with the body cams to do that.
I think, Elizabeth, they are both in the policy as well. 16.8 talks about it, that they can use it. Section 17 is completely all about that. So how it can be used for the whole department, not just the employees' personal training, but I think it's good to see that.
Yes. Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions about that? Or okay. Gretchen, I don't know if we're on to the next topic.
Yeah, thank you. And for those of you who are newer to us, that's a good example of just a chance to kind of review a topic. When there's not a case review present, we want to take that time to try to develop deeper understanding of issues that you could predict could come up in the future in a complaint. And so it's great to have this opportunity to hear the information, ask questions, give feedback. So thank you for the information.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Aaron, I know the next topic is elections, and I know we talked about having me jump in on this part, if you'd like me to do that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so our bylaws direct the board to, at the beginning of each calendar year, to appoint a chairperson and a vice chairperson. And for those of you who might have that document open and are following along, that's in section 8. It explains that we look for you to choose a chair and a vice chair by a majority vote. And so we need to do that this evening because our first meeting of the year, we didn't have a quorum, so we weren't able to take any actions. And the chair and the vice chair serve a 1-year term, and you could be reelected for more terms. And the chair is what you probably would imagine from your past experience, that a chair presides or facilitates the meetings. And they also connect in serving as a liaison on setting the agendas, reviewing draft minutes, and check in if, like, for example, if there's a complaint that's emerging that we'll want to schedule, we touch base with the chair and get going on initiating scheduling. And then, of course, the vice chair subs in for the chair. So if the chair is unable to be there, like just like Aaron's doing now, is Aaron has served as vice chair this past year, and so subs in when the chair is unavailable. So tonight we need to ask you all to appoint a chair and a vice chair, and I really have empathy. It's awkward with, you're all new. I know David is returning and Aaron is returning, but I believe everyone else is new. So I really want to appreciate that difficulty, but still welcome and ask you to participate in that. People are welcome to appoint themselves and or someone else. And also the alternate members are able to participate in the selection, as are the regular members, the bylaws speculate, or excuse me, say. So let's stop and see if there's questions. And then after questions, we will open the floor to welcome any nominations. If people are interested in serving themselves or would like to nominate someone, they're welcome to share that. And we can do chair and then vice chair, or take it together, just depending on how the conversation flows. So first, is there any questions or discussion about that?
No.
All right, very good. Well, then just to check in and see if there's any nominations. I think I've heard a little bit about folks that are interested. And so I don't know if you'd like to share that, or if anyone would like to do any nominating.
I don't mind being chair.
Very good. So Aaron, you are open to serving as chair.
Mm-hmm.
And any other nominations or interest for that position? All right. Well, hearing none, then I would ask if there's any opposition, perhaps, to having Aaron serve as chair. Okay, well then, Aaron, would you like to take over the vice chair component?
Okay, and nominations for vice chair. Anyone? Nobody? Come on, you guys.
Step up.
Oh, thank you. Elizabeth, who else? Going once, going twice. All right.
I'm noticing David unmuting, and he had expressed some interest. David, did you want to jump in?
I was going to do if no one else was, but it seems like other people will, so that's great.
So we have two. I mean, so we can vote, right?
You can, unless David's withdrawing. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. What do you want to, or?
I can withdraw. Yeah, I was going to do if no one else would.
Okay. So I guess it's Elizabeth. That's,
Yay.
yeah.
We should confirm if there's any opposition.
Oppositions first. Sorry.
But it sounds like everyone's in favor.
And everyone in favor? Aye. Everyone's so quiet.
Mhm.
It's only
I know it's
Tuesday.
difficult. I have empathy for you all being so new, and we need to take that step. But thank you, all of you, for serving.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Of course, we'll become best buds.
Yes.
Okay, so we got that. Any future training or orientation plans, Gretchen?
Yes, thank you. Orientation for our newer members is underway. We offered two times that seem to fit folks' schedules. One was earlier today and the other one is on Thursday. So we're hoping to give everyone an introduction to the work of the board. And then at the next meeting, one of our required trainings is in the queue, and that's from Mark to do discussion around ethics and discussion around public meetings. Also, a required training that'll need to be in the queue pretty soon is about civil rights. So we'll see a civil rights training soon. But then other than that, it's really open to the interests of the board in terms of topics that you might find interesting or helpful as background. Areas where you would be concerned would come up. Sometimes, for example, things come up in conversation, like earlier tonight, I think Sergeant Galvin mentioned coming back on the topic of use of firearms if the group was interested. And so that's something that we can add and plan on if the board's interested, and if that's all right with the police department, if they have the capacity. So that's basically the plan. So I guess I'd have two questions or three questions. Did you want to circle back on use of firearms? Are there other topics that are on folks' minds right now that we could start to prepare and get in the queue? And then I also wanted to ask the police department if the ride-alongs are reopened to the public or if those are still concluded. Some of you might know that one of the training elements that we normally do is 2 ride-alongs per year, but those have been suspended during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I wanted to check and see if those were operational or still suspended.
Hi, Gretchen. Yeah, so April 18th, we'll start accepting ride-alongs again. So we're consistent with the federal transportation guidelines there. So as long as nothing major changes with that, then April 18th is the date, so 1 week. And then from that point on, we can accept ride-alongs. So glad to do it.
Yay, I'm so excited. Oh,
Yeah.
I was thinking, what about, I'm always sticking to that canine thing, Gretchen. So what about talking about the canine, like what they do, So I'm always back to that canine. Sorry, until we get it, I'm not going to stop talking about it. So, because we talk about trainings on, use of force and what's the protocol when a dog bites a suspect or something, just for general knowledge. So, and I'm not volunteering to get bitten, but I'm just asking. So,
Lieutenant, I'd be happy to follow up with you and see if we can get that scheduled in. That's something we've done in the past.
Yeah. Sure, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
One thing I love, I know that either it has or is about to, we've started a crisis intervention team or crisis response team. I'd love to hear from our police department if that is a part of the police or if that's a separate entity, and how you guys will be working together and determining what calls go where.
So is that a question about our current model that we've had for a number of years, or the newest, the more Kahoot style model that is being proposed?
I suppose both.
Okay.
When schedule, I'm not asking you to respond right now necessarily, but if we're able to add that to
Is that like Kahoots? Were you referring to Kahoots? I was just.
Yeah, that's the proposed model that's really not in place, but for the one that we've had in place for the last, 7-8 years, the one where we have a mental health professional riding with an officer, that we could definitely talk on that, and then maybe talk about, because I think some of the proposed stuff is still, I know it was with council last night and I missed the session, yeah, I didn't know what the final decision was on that. Actually, I didn't find out. But other than that, we can talk about the program we have now, and then as the Kahoots model develops in Salem, then we can definitely talk about that a little bit more as well.
Great. We can talk and get that in the queue. And to answer the question, yeah, last night City Council did vote to direct staff to explore a request for qualifications and request for proposals to try to understand who or what providers may be available in the Salem area to propose operations of a crisis response unit, and what the costs they would anticipate that would be. So they took that step to direct staff to explore issuing those documents. So that's where that question is.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to hear about diversity, equity, and inclusion training that the department goes through, how often, who provides the training, content.
And I think I'm going to build upon what Oni just said. Gretchen, you know, my heart is set on ADA issues. I just want to know, I think the protocols, the policies, the training on how to appropriately interact, engage with the disabled community, and you know, how do you say, I don't know, stop to someone who has hearing this, you know, all of that. What are we doing for that? I'm really curious.
Excellent. That's a good list of topics. As you can see, and for those who are newer, when we don't have case reviews, we utilize the time with these kinds of topics. So this is really helpful to get a sense of where the board's interests lie. I can work with our chair and vice chair and with the Salem Police Department representatives to come up with a draft schedule based on what you've described and circle that back out to you. But we do want to start with the requireds around ethics and public meetings and the civil rights that are part of what is written in that we must provide to you too.
Do you know when we could do in-person meetings again?
I don't. Right now, the city is looking at that question. There's some discussion about whether to be consistent with when city council reopens and when all of our boards and commissions open, or whether we'd begin opening based upon the wishes of individual boards. And so all of that is still under development and we don't have a date at this time. One of our challenges is that the sound system at the council chambers has some issues. So that's delaying, I think, some of those discussions.
Okay.
Aaron,
Sorry,
question.
Gretchen. I'm sorry, David.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to go back to Gretchen earlier in orientation. You did mention we probably should be downloading the form and apply for the ride-along since it's starting next week. Is that?
Yes, hearing that ride-alongs are available beginning April 18th, I'll send a follow-up email for you on that. There's traditionally been a form that a person would fill out, and then that's sent over to the police department, and then the police department and you as an individual work to schedule a mutually workable date. And the board is asked to do 2 ride-alongs per year and to complete one of those prior to a case review. So it'd be great if all of you could begin to get to work on trying to think of a date and a time that could work for you. And so I'll make sure to follow up with some information on how to do that. And I'm happy to assist with any questions or scheduling needs around that.
And is there a best time, days, shifts, weekends, full moon? How would you?
That's up to a matter of opinion. I've heard complete opposite. I've heard the Friday night fans and the early morning, like some people want quiet and other people want rowdy. I would defer to all of you on that.
So I worked patrol for 12 years, 13 years of my career. And it amazes me. You would think like a Friday night would be, or Saturday night would be the busiest. And yes, they are often busy, but some of my busiest times have been a Sunday morning, like where you would think it'd be completely nothing. And so it's really best, or it's based on your schedule. If you want a swing shift schedule, that's typically like call volume. If you want to see like what officers are responding to, like call volume, they're going to, 10 different calls a day or 15 calls. Swing shifts where you're going to get that experience. Graveyard, it's a little bit more of your like intoxication type stuff, burglaries, more of that stuff that happens at night. So it's really what works best for your schedule. We're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
When you say ride-alongs, you don't mean the whole 8-hour shift, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a certain, several hours, whatever works best for you, and then the officer, how many hours they can go. So you don't want to sit there when they're typing reports.
Sorry. I was just going to say, typically when you go over the 8-hour period, you get into the boring period of just a lot of typing at the tail end of the shift. But other than that, I would definitely encourage to go between 4 to 8 hours to get a better experience just for everyone here.
David,
Don't wear high heels. Wear really good shoes because you might have to run. If it's cold, be prepared. Just, FYI, I've done it a lot. So, those who haven't done it, just a heads up. So, okay. Are we on to the next, which
No,
is?
Erin, I interrupted
Yes,
David.
sorry.
I interrupted David. I
Oh,
can't.
sorry, David.
Actually, between you and Gretchen, you kind of asked the question I was going to ask.
What
I
was
was going to
that?
ask about having the ride-alongs done before the next hearing.
So any more future planning and orientation stuff you guys want to do? No. And any board member comments?
I'm going to ask a question. Gretchen, you said something about signing confidentiality agreements and etc. Are they going to be arriving at our homes or?
You'll also get an email from me about that. Yeah, I'm going to send you a document. Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. And that will need to be notarized. So we have notaries at the city hall, or you can utilize a notary of your choice. But yeah. And for those of you who might not be sure what we're talking about, sometimes information can be a part of the case reviews that's confidential. And so one of the activities we make sure to do before we jump into a case review is ask each of you to sign an oath of confidentiality. So that's one of those onboarding steps that'll be coming up next. And yeah, this last item on the agenda, board member comments, has been a fairly open time. If there's members of the board that would like to make remarks or ask questions or share things on their mind, we've always had this as kind of a concluding part on the agenda. So that any of those open questions or thoughts are just perfect for this part of the agenda.
I have a question. Is there a way that we as a group could do a tour of the police department?
I will defer to the police about that. That's right, David.
That's a great idea. I believe we're starting to open up for tours. I haven't heard the official word yet, Lieutenant.
Yeah, it's the same date. So April 18th is when we open everything. And so that would be totally appropriate anytime after the 18th. We can set something up. We can actually take some time and pit stop in our simulator room, which is pretty new. And if we wanted to run some simulator events and show you guys that, we could do that as well. So
would the group be interested in incorporating that into your next meeting, for example? Maybe it would be appropriate to meet in your space and do a tour, or would you be interested in a separate one-off time? What would the pleasure of the board be?
I think that would be appropriate as a part of our meeting, although I do know that on the next meeting, we're planning to do our ethics training as well. So I don't know if that would take up time that would take us away from that ethics training or not.
Yeah.
Police department could send us a couple different options. Maybe we can sign up. I don't know if the whole board or half and half, or without being too disruptive. I haven't seen the new building other than outside, so I would love to see it.
I'll need to track whether or not a quorum comes, and then there's rules. We wouldn't want you to deliberate towards board things if there's quorum, so we'll have to pay attention.
Just the
that. Yeah, maybe I'll get some information about how the tours work, if you have regular times, or if we'd want to sign up as a group and notice it to the community. Mark, I see you're with us. Do you have advice for us on that?
I don't on that, but I just wanted to say that I don't know if the board is aware. I think it's probably not generally known that the municipal police department, the Salem Police Department, is not does not provide for long-term custody of people. That all of that is actually the responsibility of the Marion County Sheriff's Department. Well, there are some holding cells at the police department. I've never heard it come up. I don't know if there's an interest, but obviously a county jail is a very different experience than what you're going to see at the Salem Police Department. I think understanding the next step in the process where people who are held in custody and how that works is also very educational, important, although it is not the work of the Salem Police Department. I don't know if there's an interest or if that's even something we could coordinate with our law enforcement partners over at the Marion County Sheriff's Department, but something to throw out there as well.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I have a tremendous interest in that. My background is in corrections, so I'm very interested in seeing what our local corrections is like. And even if we had opportunities to do something like a ride along with them more than just a tour and be there for the duration of a shift. Or if I know that they're not the city of Salem, so it may be at kind of their whims, but that would also be something I'd be interested in.
I used to work at the criminal circuit court at the annex and often was in intake. So it's a very different experience. I would recommend it.
Great.
Yeah,
I'm seeing some nods. I'll be sure to send out some options. Grant, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No problem. I work in the state corrections, and there's a big difference from taking a tour and sticking around for an entire shift.
Mhm. I think you guys get them over at DOC when they've already been controlled and unmedicated versus when they first come into intake.
Yeah, it's a different world.
Mhm.
Anything else?
I just want to say thank you, Aaron and Elizabeth, for stepping up as co-chair, so no one else had to do it.
Next time you're doing it.
Real quick with the tours, I can get with Gretchen and we can figure something out. If it's works best, I work, Monday through Friday, regular business hours. So if that works, I mean, I'm more than happy to take, individually or as a group on that, or if we want to do it during our next meeting, I'll work with Gretchen on that and we'll figure something out.
That sounds good.
Sergeant Galvin, thank you for being here after your normal hours.
No problem.
Thank you.
So I think that's wraps it up. And our next meeting is when, Gretchen, because my phone just went off.
Of course, unless we get a case review, our next meeting would be July 12th.
Okay. Sounds good. Anyone else have any comments, questions, concerns before we all go?
Nice meeting you all.
You
Nice
too.
to meet you all.
Thank you all.
All right, well, I hereby dismiss this meeting. So have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.